Hello, hello, and welcome to Into the MoTaverse. Today, I have Amy Phillips. She's
Hello.
a senior engineering manager, and we go back way back. I can't even remember how long. Probably about 15 years, I think.
Yeah, I reckon about that as well. Yeah, because you were living in Cambridge at the time. I
Yeah,
distinctly remember us meeting up in Cambridge, and that was a long time ago. So, yeah, it's been a
yeah.
long while.
So my youngest son was born around then, and he's about to turn 15. So that about matches up.
Yes. Wow. That's incredible.
There you go. But yeah, welcome, Amy. It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
I've
Thanks for having me.
been I've been doing some catch ups with some people from the Motiverse, as I would call it. People who have been around a while, people who have moved on to other career paths, moved on in tech outside of testing and quality. Um, and a lot of that is intentional because we're moving towards becoming not just a quality and testing community, but more considering tech overall. Um, and you are on my list of people to talk
Excellent.
to help us figure out. But yeah, would you like to give us a quick intro into who Amy Phillips is?
Yeah, absolutely. So great to be back here. So I started out quite a lot of years ago now. I was very much in manual testing. I started out in like test consultancy, and we'd get sort of like dispatched into companies to do the like testing of their stuff, often working alongside other companies that were doing the development. And we sort of have these like company to company sort of things where you pit off the development teams against the testing teams. It was all very strange. Um, then did sort of quite a lot of years of like testing in different places, lots of different teams, seeing sort of things evolving. I spent quite a big chunk of my time at a startup, which is Songkick, which we spent a load of time talking about in those days. And that was quite interesting because that was the transformation, I think, from seeing testing as this silo and actually being able to transform like deployment practices and engineering practices and the things that actually all feed into quality, even if we don't necessarily get to see them or influence them. And then that led me into engineering management. And I've been an engineering manager now for quite a lot of years. I've been lucky. I've had some like incredible teams, lots of different types of teams. So some have been very, very much sort of like infrastructure platforms, like putting Kubernetes in place and keeping systems online. Others have been software sort of product focused, like building out like mobile apps for customers. A lot of it has been sort of internal like tooling, internal platforms, and sort of figuring out what do we need within companies to make them run. So all of those have been sort of leading teams of different types of engineer, solving different types of problems, but like there's lots and lots of like common situations, common problems that you have to solve. So yeah, it's been a really fun journey. Basically trying to figure out how do we meet customer needs and do that in a good way and help people grow and be kind to people as we do it.
Have you figured it out yet?
I don't think there's a straightforward answer. I feel like I figured out a few pieces, which has been great. I definitely you look back over your career, don't you? Like, oh, probably wouldn't do that in the same way again. But I don't think there's a, like the industry is always changing. And I think that's what
Yeah.
keeps it interesting is that, people are always the common. So that bit for sure is like always important. You can always be trying to figure out better ways to handle situations, better ways to help people. But at least there are some common things. On the tech side, it's fascinating because it completely changes.
Yeah.
I think one thing that is hard, but also really good to keep in mind is no matter how brilliant the system you build is, some team in the future, and often not that far in the future, sometimes like 3 or 4 years time, will celebrate turning that thing off. It's the legacy, and they will actually, you will see their celebration of being able to finally get rid of the legacy system. You remember just being like, we loved it, we were so proud of the work. So I think that's what's also led me to management, but also kept me there, is that throughout all of that tech is changing, systems are changing, but the people are the core, and you could always do good by trying to help people like achieve their goals and get to where they're actually trying to get to.
It's interesting you say about celebrating the legacy stuff. Internally, we've started modeling our work around like the R test. We call it the R test. And it's kind of like that celebration that you say. It's like, like as you're saying it, I was going,
yeah.
So like literally whenever we build something, whenever we improve something, whenever we say goodbye to something, I think the goodbye angle is something I hadn't really thought about. But that's like, that passes the R test. It's like, we're making progress, right? And it's kind of recognizing that. So
I think removing stuff is so critical. I think we in the sort of tech industry, we don't pay that enough attention. We tend to, I think, measure adding stuff. So like how many, pull requests or merge requests, or how many features have you shipped, how much have you added? But actually, I think that, I always love to try and think about like if you're dealing with process and you have to, you always need to add stuff to process, right? There's always the incident or the mess up or whatever that you go, okay, how do we avoid doing that again? But if you're not careful, you just put red tape over everything and nobody can move. So I'm actually quite a big fan of trying to think about like, what can we take out? Like what processes can we remove? Or, what is actually feels like it's too complex. I have a very unfortunately difficult, like non-scientifically trackable metric, which I always like teams to have the right level of chaos. And I feel like what I'm sort of trying like think about now is like if you don't have any chaos, so if you have, like processed everything, teams, I think, well, they move very slowly, firstly, but I think they also feel quite like low energy. People have kind of lost that ability to sort of individually think for themselves, to have those creative moments where they can just like see an opportunity and like go for it or try something. Like I worked in one team many years ago, and every time someone had an idea, they would get asked to bring the data. Like, what is the data? What like validate? So they'd say, oh, I think we should add, like this feature, or we could modify this feature to do this thing. Okay, great. Where's the data? Now, the intention behind the request was perfect, right? Like we should be data driven. But actually, in reality, what ended up happening was it was quite hard to get all the data. And then you had to we had a lot of people on board and there'd be discussions. It basically ended up just killing creativity because people would be all excited by these ideas. And by the time they'd gone through that process, they'd kind of lost enthusiasm. So, it was like we'd lost that opportunity to be a bit like scrappy and move fast and try stuff. And then you have complete opposite other end where it's like, actual chaos. You're like, okay, we need to rein it back in a bit here. Like people don't know what each other are doing, or we don't have a like shared goal, or, we're just causing loads of problems for customers or other teams. And then you're like, okay, we're too far. So I like to try and get that sense of like, does it feel like we have high energy creativity, but in a controlled way?
It's interesting because I think sometimes people overvalue ideas as well, and maybe the ideas are not
cheap.
And that they've not come at the right time. So if you have the data, then you combine it with the ideas. Then it's like you can make things happen really, really quickly. But if you don't have the data, then it just slows everything down. And maybe that's a signal of, now's not the right time. It's going to cost us too much time, too much money, too much whatever to get that idea off the ground. And we're kind of doing that at MOT. I think we're trying to surface the data, and we're waiting for the right moment for when we have time to build stuff. Plus, the data is there. So maybe that's the right kind of chaos.
I think that's it. Where you've kind of got that scrappiness, right? Like you don't. I feel like if you actually had like a 5-year roadmap planned out, like it works in some companies, it's definitely needed at times, but I think for a lot of teams, certainly the teams I've worked on, if we have that sort of 5-year plan and it's like locked in and nobody can do anything else, then we would definitely miss opportunities. So I think it's like, but I like the I like trying to build teams where you actually have individuals and they can be personally responsible, but in a team way. Like, it has to work within a team. It's not just 10 people sitting near each other. Like, they have to be pulling in the same direction. But I love that when you actually can get, because it's not about levels of experience or job title or anything. It is much more about ownership, I think, and people being like personally responsible for doing the right thing. And if they don't know something, find like asking someone or like bringing people in. But I think if you can get teams to have that, then there's so much you can achieve.
Do you feel that like job titles, it's not that they're meaningless, but they mean less these days?
Oh, well, I don't know, actually. It's an interesting one. I think it really depends. So I think, yes, in a lot of ways, things have blurred up. And for many people, I think having like more sort of like generic or sort of broader job titles makes sense, because I don't think the jobs, like particularly like engineering jobs, are quite as, say, clear cut as they used to be. So I used to work on teams who definitely always had like a front end developer or a back end engineer, or like full stack, and they really mean different things. That's not true anymore, I don't think. I think engineers powered up with AI tools can do loads more stuff. But I do think that levels can be significant, because in some places it's very hierarchical, and actually the level job title you hold will open doors, get you access to meetings. It means your ideas carry more weight. It can be detrimental as well. So I do think they do carry meaning still. Maybe it's not quite the same as it used to be. Like, I don't think it maybe signals your skill set so much as it used to. But I think they do carry a decent bit of weight.
It's almost like levels ties into experience, and that's important,
Yeah.
right? Because I feel like the world is a bit crazy at the moment, and
It's a bit interesting, isn't it? Yeah, it's amazing how much it's changed. Like, the speed at which it's changed is stunning. And not all in a bad way. I think there's some really good stuff. But also it's like, wow, okay, it's daily. It really is daily. So stuff is so different.
How are you feeling about that? How are you coping, or what are you doing
Yeah, it's been
around
an
that?
interesting one. I think in management, it's definitely different from, say, engineers. I have seen some really interesting stuff. So on the good side, I think there's a lot of sort of mundane tasks, particularly as managers. There's a decent bit of admin that goes into a management role. A lot of that can be handled by AI, and that's great. I'm really enjoying having AI as kind of like my rubber duck. So, like, I actually find it's genuine. Like, it's a tool. So I think you have to use it wisely. But there are many, many times where actually I will go Claude and actually have a chat about something and come away being like, okay, I'm much clearer now in my own plan, or like we've refined it together. The sort of feedback you used to get from like a peer, I can get that now quite decently from AI. I'm seeing with engineers, it's really interesting where we are now seeing that the sort of engineering skills, as in like being able to gather requirements and understand context and assess trade-offs, that stuff is still as valuable as it's ever been. But what we're seeing less is that people can switch languages really easily now, because actually you don't need to know the syntax. So actually, if you're a really strong Go engineer, you can be just as strong a Ruby engineer without having to learn Ruby. So we're seeing a lot of crossover there, which I think is going to be really interesting. It's really powerful. I had one really successful example quite recently where I wanted to run a sort of session with some of the engineering managers who report to me to, try and help them understand some of the things I've sort of always saying, oh, we should do it in this way. So, okay, we'll run a bit of an exercise, a workshop type thing, and we can explore, do some exercises together and see some stuff. And I worked with AI to design it. So it was really easy because I was able to be like, here's the sort of thing I want. I want it to be fun. I want it to take 45 minutes. And here's what I think we'll hit upon. And we had some like, here's the first version. Like in the workshop, it was like, here's the first task. And here's what didn't work. And then we do another. And it really reminded me of a lot of the sort of training things we used to use in sort of the earlier days of Agile or the earlier days of like testing and learning, practicing techniques. And honestly, Claude came up with such a good framework, and it was really fun, and it worked really well. And it took me 10 minutes to plan it. So I feel like you can get a lot of those things much more easily, which for me means I'm more likely to do them more frequently. So there's real benefits there. There are some definite downsides. I think that engineers in particular, like the role has changed. And I think there's always engineers who enjoy coding, like I enjoy the art of writing code. And I think there's less opportunity for that. It's like the role is much more now managing agents. So I think some people will feel like they've lost a sort of creative element. There's also, we're seeing a really interesting one around boundaries almost. So I think AI in its current form really taps into that kind of like dopamine hit of ticking a task off, and I just do one more, and I just do one more. So I think we're really seeing that actually people need to be very careful about setting their boundaries, because people are just being drawn into, in the evening, I'll just go and quickly check what my agent's doing. Is it blocked? I can unblock it. And they're actually ending up working many, many more hours than before when they used to do the work themselves. So I think there's some changes that are happening that we have to be careful of. I think we will lose some stuff for sure. AI is moving so fast. So then what are the guardrails? Like, how do we actually maintain quality and reliability and security? There's huge amounts to learn as we also use AI. But it's definitely an interesting time.
Could you dive more into guardrails, because that's something we're exploring at the moment? So how would you maybe define guardrails, or what kind of how are you thinking about guardrails, or any examples as well?
Yeah, so I think guardrails are really interesting ones. So AI is so new that I don't think we have yet got like common lines where like everybody, like I feel like AI is very literal. So you have to tell it like, do this thing, but don't do that thing. Now, over time, I think we will set up with like things like skills in Claude, and where we actually have that codified. And I will assume that eventually companies will set those up, and actually, people working for a company will be given, here are our company guardrails. We're not there right now. It feels very organic, and people are trying things out. But it does mean that there's a huge opportunity for things like standards to become codified. So, we've spent many, many, many years figuring out what does good code look like? What does good testing look like? How do you make a system reliable? And being able to translate that and make sure AI is doing that in the context of your own company. So hopefully AI will be learning from the broad world of knowledge of what good looks like, but every company has their own standards, and we can give that to AI. We can make that available to AI. Security is a bit the same. Like the big risk around having lots more AI is it's much easier to find and exploit vulnerabilities. Now, eventually, I think we will be able to, very similar to how we used to talk about how do we get security testing into CI pipelines. I'm going to guess in the future that AI tools will run more security checking themselves before they commit your code. But it feels like at the moment we are figuring out what they're capable of, and then there'll be a round of how do we make sure we don't modify data that we shouldn't modify, or how do we do the security testing in advance of releasing the code, or how do we assess whether this code is going to work at the scale You need it to work. Those things, I think, are the pieces of experience that engineers currently have and know for, and code review checks for, and testing checks for. Those probably could be baked into your AI agents so that when they are writing code, you just get that stuff for free. So, I think that's where there's a lot of opportunities. And I think this is where it's really interesting with the foundational pieces become like it maybe even more important than they ever were. Like they've always been important, that what are the coding standards that everybody's working for? Like, will your code base look consistent? When somebody says they've finished doing some work, what does that mean? What testing is in place? What testing have they already done? What test data have they used? All of those things, I think we have over the years built up quite a good mechanism for dealing with in the industry. And now we need to start thinking about, is that information available for AI? Like if you're using tools, do those tools know what you mean by a good test? Like, are they actually able to reference that information or not?
It's interesting when you say, is the information available, right? It's like a total mind shift. It's like we have to make sure that it's available. And how do we make sure it's available? Do you have any learnings that you've had from that to make information more available?
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, I think it's in some ways, it's quite similar to what we have done with humans, but I think it's just putting it into different places. So, in the past, we used to do a lot of like training and writing documentation and like having run books and things. And I think it's just making sure that the places, the AI tools you're using are referencing include those same things. So, when we are writing out, or when we're working with AI, like building up the specs of what do we want, and then having those in the code repo, and then the next time somebody does one, that's in the same place, and hopefully the AI tools over time build on all their previous decisions. There's lots we can do with building up like skills, for example, to give to Claude, and you can have skills defining testing and like stating like you must always test in this place or on that environment or in this way, like all the things which I think we always wanted to train engineers on. Like, this is how you do a good job. And then actually, how do we put that into the actual files and the places that the AI agents are using to have their own rules and know what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. So you don't want to have to rely on everybody to prompt on each of those things. Like, it doesn't make sense to have to tell AI, like, make sure you've tested this. Like, we need to get that centrally in these are our standards. Every change will have this level of testing, or it will be in these places, and then making sure that the AI can actually just do it itself. So we're away from it being fully autonomous, but I think making sure things are consistent and you're not relying on an individual remembering to do this stuff and checking it themselves, but actually really taking care that, like, okay, we do have that centrally located, and that AI knows that. AI knows where that is, and it knows it should be using that stuff. I think that goes quite a long way.
It's really interesting. I just think of all the boring testing work that I've done in the past, and I just kind of celebrate the amazingness, despite, like, there's such a love-hate thing with AI at the moment. But like, I do literally think back to like some of my earlier jobs where it was just literally running through test cases and creating flow diagrams, and I just think it's like, it's amazing, right? We can
exactly, a lot of that stuff goes away. I think the main challenge we've got with AI is accuracy. So I'm sure it will improve over time, but there are definitely things it's rubbish at. Like, numbers is one. Dates is also an interesting one as well. I was using it recently to figure out, like a date, and of course I could just calculate myself, and it was coming back and it was saying, like, whatever date of this month, and then like completely the wrong day, like not even close. So there are some things like that which to a human you immediately see and you go, oh, that's wrong. So it is going to be interesting. I think like things like AI, fantastic for writing code because you always have had safety nets around writing code. So there's always been code reviews and testing and like gradual rollouts. We have all of those mechanisms in place to make sure code works. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens if you remove everything. Like what happens if you actually do trust AI on all of the verification, because sometimes it's just completely wrong.
Yeah. And you'd think that numbers and dates are easy to get right.
Yeah, for some reason it's incredibly terrible at numbers and dates. Yeah.
What's the logic behind that?
I have no idea.
I don't
And
know.
I think you can't sometimes even understand. Like, so I had a bar chart recently, and it had like bars, and it had a number above each bar, and I wanted to use the data for something else. So I was like, oh, great, okay, perfect example for AI. So I was like, give me these numbers in like a table, like a list, and like the bar chart had numbers like 3, 7, 11, like that sort of order. Came back and it was like 150, 700. They were like wildly off, and it couldn't find a source. It couldn't figure out it was so strange. I don't know where it was pulling the numbers from, but completely wrong.
Yeah, scary. Those are the things that How do you manage it?
Yeah.
Have you done anything around AI evals?
I actually haven't done anything around that, so I think that's going to be an interesting one to see it progress. But no, I haven't actually been involved there. At the moment, I'm very much a sort of an end user of AI.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am very curious to see how that all develops.
That's interesting. I wonder, are you more technical now because of AI as an engineering manager? Do you dive into like more technical stuff because AI might help you?
I think in some ways maybe, and I think it's probably for a couple of things. I think one is it's much easier to ramp up on something, and then I suppose the other one is that I suppose it's just getting into something is much easier. So time is always the challenge. I think I think that's probably the thing that always still holds true is the sort of like maker versus manager calendar. So as a manager, I spend most of my time in meetings and doing things. So actually getting those big chunks of time to really dive in on things is limited. So AI is great there because you can get started quite quickly. I think it will be interesting. I think you have to be maybe deliberate on asking it to explain stuff or making sure you understand the why. Like, I think it's probably easier to contribute like code and things because of the speed. But I'm guessing that if you're not careful, over time, your technical understanding would go down. Because what I normally do is much more like talking to people and reading things and forming my own understanding, and actually having to ask people like the why, like what feels like the stupid questions. I think with AI, it's probably much easier to just jump in and start contributing and maybe not fully understanding what is going on, like what is the technical reasoning behind that code or that thing. So I wonder over time whether actually you might end up with more of a kind of like shallow understanding of the system just because you're not necessarily forced to build up that knowledge.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, there's the whole FOMO aspect of the field, the need to keep up. And it's like, I so want to dive into AI stuff. I just can't it's really hard to find the time.
Yeah.
But,
and I think it's that learning curve as well. It's been really interesting, like seeing people learning. And it's one of those times, like we've always sort of known, I think we always sort of say in tech, like it's always evolving. So you have to keep up, like whatever technical skills you have today, you have to keep refreshing them. But AI has been even more true than that because of the speed of change. And I think that's probably difficult. Like, I think not everybody finds it so easy to learn. And I think that not everyone has like the time to dedicate to all of the learning. Not everybody learns in the same way. So I think, Lara Hogan actually put out a newsletter, I think it was last week, and she said it really well, which is like, there's almost that risk of the sort of the skills gap getting bigger, and some people really getting into the sort of expert level very quickly and leaving behind everyone else.
Yeah.
And she had a great example of kind of like needing to put in place, like, how do you have those like skills sharing sessions? Like, she suggested a format of a meeting where you could do that. And I think, I've seen the same in my team, where some people are very enthusiastic, some people are less sure, some people have found it easier to pick up the skills than others. But what's really worked is actually people helping each other, and not just on how to use the tools, but helping each other identify, well, that's the type of task that would be really suited. And actually, I tried it on a task like this one the other week, and it wasn't so helpful. And it's almost kind of giving people permission to, like, you don't have to use it for every single thing you've ever done. So how do you pick what is the right time? Again, it's a tool. So I think it's almost learning when to deploy the tool and when to actually just rely on other tools or yourself, So I think there's definitely a sort of a skill set that comes with working with it.
It makes me wonder, as you were saying, that there's maybe there's potential for AI to bring us closer together when we're collaborating more closely on things and trying to be a bit more intentional in communicating all the things that are happening. Yeah. Maybe we end up coming together in better ways, or even tapping into each other's knowledge if we get better at documenting stuff, and then you potentially know who to reach out to, then you can reach out to people easier. It's not like maybe in theory you don't have to like dig through a ton of documentation to find what you need or who wrote it. You can find that easily and then reach out to the person quickly.
I think that's right. When it's a tool like that and sort of supplementing things, I think you're right. Like it definitely can be a way, I think, of gaining that information. Or like, sometimes I think when you're new into a tool or tech or a situation or a team, whatever, people use like an acronym or, and it like, you're like, oh, and actually things like AI make that really easy, right? It might not be accurate, but you're in a slightly better place than you were before. So I think it has also enabled some things, but I hope that people do the work to bring others with them, because it's actually interesting. So the ever-wise Sally Goebel likened this AI sort of transformation to when manual testing switched to automated testing. And as such a good sort of comparison, because it's like a complete shift, like jobs completely change. The end goal is the same. But suddenly it's like we can't just keep doing what we were doing before. We need to find new ways. And I think what we saw when we went through that was that some people were so great at like putting together, workshops and trainings and sharing their experiences and having like fun exercises. It didn't have to be a bad experience to learn the new skills, but people were helping each other. And I think we can do the same on AI. Like everybody needs to learn an entirely new set of skills. The tools are always changing, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to go alone. Like I hope people do build up these communities and share what works. In a way, AI makes it easier to share, because you could ask your AI tools to say, give me this in a shareable format and just share it. Like it can do that stuff. So, I think if we are intentional about remembering like communities and remembering teams and wanting to help others succeed, then we can do that in a good way.
That's why I'm so excited about community at the moment. The knowledge angle. I'm like, oh yes, this could be very, very interesting, and like the way the MoTaverse is heading is kind of like with that thinking in mind. It's like, let's get more voices on board. Let's get more human, real stories, not like all this stuff where
Yeah.
people are sharing random stuff online. You just don't know what's true or what's
That's
not.
it. Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation and people pushing like agendas and things. And I don't think, I think what we risk losing, I think, with the whole kind of AI age is those human connections. But I don't think we have to. Like if we do genuinely use them as tools, then we benefit. But I think we do have to like keep hold of like the human stuff, because honestly, that's the only thing that's like truly solid. Like it's what keeps me in management, right? Genuinely, because tech will always change, systems will
Yeah.
always change. Like some projects will be great, some will be terrible. There'll always be like incident bugs and all of the tough stuff. But at the heart of it all, it's people. It's people living their lives, living through their careers, trying to get to goals or achieve things. And actually, like, I think if we can remember that, then we do good in all the other pieces.
Yeah, and combining the two, right? The human with the AI, I really do think could be interesting. One of the angles I took recently was something that I call 20% AI time.
Okay.
So I was thinking, like, how can we adopt AI as our internal team, but not like go all in because that's too risky or we don't necessarily have the resources for that. And so it's like stealing from the Google 20% learning time. It's like, well, what about 20% AI time where we encourage a team to spend an hour a day? It needs to be like an hour a day and not like 1 day a week because of the tokens. It
Yeah.
gets used up. Yeah, but like an hour a day, spend an hour a day using AI for something that might help you do something better or
Yeah.
faster.
That's it.
Um,
Yeah. I think that's it. And there's a lot of stuff which is really valuable in day-to-day life. Things like gathering, like preparing and sharing an update on how a project or something like that. AI can actually do that. It takes a little bit of upfront work to get the right prompt and do that. So, in that sense, it feels like, oh, this is taking me longer. But once you have that in place, then the future stuff is virtually free. So, I do think that it is about like adapting, like sort of trying to figure out like what can I do differently or what could I eliminate, and then how do I put that in place.
and when it comes to like platforms, so you've done a lot of work around platforms. What does your world look like at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's been really interesting on platforms like over the years, because I think I really enjoy working on platforms. I think you get a nice balance of building out like a true product and trying to like meet customer needs, but also solving a real problem. But I think one of the problems that the platforms, like particularly internal platforms or platforms that enable kind of like customers to have a good experience, so like like infrastructure platforms, is it breaks down the silos. So like I think it's really often very difficult in companies. You have like some people who are like we were talking about community and like what are the kind of knowledge sharing standards, or how does one person know that this team over there has solved a similar problem and actually found a great solution? Like how does that information flow? Or like testing, like testing was always used to be very, very siloed. Then there was always that great frustration that other people didn't know anything about testing. So you've got lots of those things where there's like teams figuring out how to do things well, and then how do you get that to other people? And I think a platform, in whatever format that is, so it can either be like in the sort of the truest sense, like a proper internal platform, or like something like Kubernetes or something built on Kubernetes, like an actual real platform, it exists. Or it can be more of a sort of mindset, so like things all being together in a central place. And then that is the thing that guides people. So quite a lot of the work one of my teams has been doing recently is around common like templates that other people can use, so that then when anybody starts a new project, they just get stuff for free. They don't need to think about what do I do like for logging, or what types of tests do I, like, we don't want them to have to remember all of those things. You can just literally put them in a place, and then when like all we have to do is when you start a new project, you're using this library and they get everything for free. So I love that sort of approach, and it means that you remove the sort of temptation of people working on the platforms to solve for just one person, which is really, really tempting. It feels really good, but is a really challenging one to change because it just doesn't scale. And you sort of build up these really tricky dynamics where people come and say, could you just do this thing? Now, could you do this other thing? Could you do this different thing? And then it's really hard to reward. It's really hard to like measure. And I think if you can get people to really be thinking about how do I put something in a platform way so that it is available for anyone to use, it meets broader needs, even if some of them are like specialized. It's not just that one person over there wanted, I don't know, this label on this issue to say this thing, but like, how do you make it so people could create issues with the name and actually that be centralized? So I think if you can start to think along those lines, then it's a more enjoyable experience for the teams building things. They have more freedoms, they have more sort of ways of getting the recognition for the work they're doing. People can see the outcome versus just tasks being done. It's better for the end users because you've got more like standardization. People don't have to be, you don't have to go nagging people like do this thing. Like they just get stuff for free in a standardized way. But it also will, I think, feed into AI because you will have those foundations that agents will pick up as well. And so that standardization continues. So I think looking at ways where things can just be centralized and reused, and actually it's not a case of someone needing to come and ask like, how do I find this thing, or what do I do about that, like, but actually looking for how do you put things like documentations and standards and stuff together, and then as the next step, and then how do you make that like free so people don't even need to know they exist? How would they just get that stuff into IDEs or agents or code bases or whatever your central point is, and get that for free?
How do you actually do that though? Because like I guess the old way of trying to do something like that would be wikis. But what's the modern day world, or is this something that could potentially all live in an AI Claude?
Yeah, I think it could. It could all live in Claude. It could all live in a place that Claude references. So it could all live in a wiki, and Claude could just know about the wiki, and Claude could have like skills that basically tell it when you're asked a question, go and check the wiki first.
Yeah.
You could build something like that. In my current team, we're doing quite a lot around actual tooling. So at the sort of heart of what we're doing right now is around the development environment, and actually having a really good development environment where people can work and get what they need. We're trying to feed as much information into that space as we can. So ideally, we don't want people to have to like write code and then remember they need something and have to go off and find it. Eventually, I hope AI will plug this gap. But for now, how do you actually get it so that you have things like API specs in the development environment? That you don't want to have to ideally commit the code and then test against a spec. What can you do locally to do that? Same with testing. I think you can put some really good like mocks in place, have some really good kind of like examples of what does a good test look like, and start to build up a knowledge base that's separate, or like it's much closer to the writing of the code than remember to go off to a wiki and read this document and then come back. So I think you still need to have things written down, so because I think that's where you get that original like alignment. But I don't think on its own it's enough. I think we need to also think about, okay, and then how do you get tools that we're using, whether those are AI or other, and how do those tools know about that thing, and how can you build connections there? As much as you can tie all that together, then the easier things get. So I think there's lots of things we can borrow from incident management. So, for example, thinking about having monitoring just running on stuff, having alerts coming to you. You can apply that same sort of thinking to other things. So you can, right, information can feed to the relevant like person and have really clear actions for them. And that works in lots of places. So I think it's just about trying to think about what can you do to remove the need for humans to remember things and actually go off and educate themselves and then come back and do the right thing. Like, how do you make it really easy for someone to do the right thing? So I actually think everybody wants to do the right thing. Everybody, well, not everybody, but almost everybody goes to the work every day wanting to do the best job they can. And it's like pressures that mean people forget stuff, or time pressures mean they actually don't have time to go and read this essay and then come back, or like there's lots of things that get in their way. So as much as you can remove those, pave out the path and just make it really, really easy. One thing that I always try and keep in mind, I used to work in a place, an office where we had dishwashers, and it was unbelievable the difference between if the dishwasher was closed, the dishwasher, I should say, was next to the sink, right? Like directly next to it. If the dishwasher was closed, at the end of the day, everybody would put their dirty cup in the sink. And then the cleaner would have to take everything from the sink and put it in the dishwasher. And what we realized was if you leave the dishwasher door open and the drawer pulled out, everybody puts their dirty cup in the dishwasher. So it's trying to do that. It's like the nudge theory, right? What is the little things you can do that mean that people don't have to remember things or put extra effort in, but they end up doing the easier or the right solution.
Yeah, I love it. Whose job do you think it is to think of all these things? Is it the engineering manager's job, or how does that look
No,
for
I
you?
think it's probably everybody. I do think that has become, or in most places, and I think should be everywhere, decentralized. I think people have an individual responsibility. So yes, everybody needs to do the job they're there to do, but I do think it is a bit of an anti-pattern that people are working around problems because someone else didn't fix it for them. Like at the very, very least, they should be raising them up. And I actually think with things like AI, it is way easier to put in place a small, could be a bit rough around the edges, but a small thing that will actually start to remove some of those pain points. So I think it's everybody's responsibility. For me, it's all about good engineering. Like probably building up the big platforms and being able to maintain them and things, you probably need a team to do that. But I don't think that not having a team means you should just ignore these. I think there's loads of good stuff people can do without too much time or effort to actually be centralizing effectively what is good engineering.
Is there a way that you would describe your current approach to engineering? Like in the olden days, we might say agile. We're agile. How would you describe how you think about engineering or tech management in general these days?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's still agile, to be honest. Like I think that it's maybe become a little bit less sort of prescriptive, like by the book. I think that when I started out in agile, like there was a lot of people debating what flavor of agile they used, and like it was really like they had significant meanings. The places I worked in, one place that was like very much Scrum by the book, and there were things where people would be like, no, but you can't do that. Like you literally cannot behave in that way because of Scrum, and it was like a stick that people used to like beat each other with. I think in most places I've worked in recently, it's been a lot softer, and people I think have been a bit more focused on like what are we trying to achieve. So I think agile's become now so familiar. Like I think most people have worked in places where they have done some forms of like planning or some forms of like stand up, some forms of retrospectives. Like I think those practices are now quite common, that you can almost piece together what works for your needs. So I've worked in some teams where daily stand-ups have been critical, have really helped us, and other places where they haven't, they've just been like wasting time, and we've either not had them or we've done them in a different way. Same with retrospectives. I've been in places where we did like a mini retrospective every day, like 5 minutes every day. In my current teams, we do one a quarter. So it really depends on the team you have. What are you trying to achieve? And I like that. I think that there's a nice element of humans are individuals. Teams are also quite individual, and it depends on the environment you work in, the people you have on the team, what projects are you doing. And I think you need to be willing to assess and adapt on what is getting in the way of you delivering results. And I do think that's one thing that has changed a lot recently, though, or not recently, but over the years, around engineering management. And so with the tech industry and the sort of pace of things, I don't think that engineering management now is just people. I don't think it is like servant leadership. I don't think it can afford to be. Now, engineering management needs to be about how do you get a team of capable and motivated individuals working on the right things. Because if you're not delivering results, then you're in trouble. But also if you're delivering the wrong results, then you're also in trouble. Things are moving so fast that I think we need to be really good about focusing on the right things, and then how do we work well together? So working well together is always going to be key. Like, how do we communicate and how do we support each other? How do we learn? All of that stuff is still critically important, but it must also go for an end goal. And I don't think that was always the case. I think we've been through different phases in the tech industry, but I think right now it is absolutely, is your team actually delivering meaningful results?
Yeah, I like it though. It feels good.
Right? I like it as well, actually. Yeah, I think that I think there have been times in the past where it's kind of like, things get a bit caught up in how many spaces at the beginning of this line, and there's a lot of that type of stuff, and it's like you can get a bit purist. But I actually do like that. I feel like we go to work to solve problems. And it's actually fun when we get to do that.
Yeah, that focus on solving the problem, doing better, being more efficient. I'm like in MOT, I'm just like, oh, this is so much fun. I'm loving just refining everything we're doing and seeing the improvements, and it's just like, that's
that's it. It's almost I think it's quite a lot of that kind of startup-y mindset. So it's quite nice to see things coming together. I quite enjoy that sort of pace. And being able to improve, get things actually changing around.
And it's much better to think about that than, for example, argue over manual testing and automation testing, which is still going on.
Still going on. I did see that recently, and I was like, hang on, haven't we resolved this yet? But I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think and even testing as a whole, I think that testing is so important. But it's so interesting. I found it interesting in my career, kind of seeing from starting out right as a test consultant, where it was like we literally worked for the company that did the testing. We were just over in the side doing that work, and it was job done. Coming right through to now, I would be worried, I think, if I worked in a place where engineers, people writing the code, weren't doing their own testing, because I think it's tied so closely together. But part of that is this responsibility, and it is this pace, and for sure you need experts and you need knowledge and training and tools, and there's still lots to do. But I would much prefer to work with groups of people on how do we solve problems versus having that sort of more academic, what is this definition? Does it mean that? Can we do this? We need to do what's right for our team and our company. And if we get that right, I think that we've done a good job.
Yeah. It's been amazing. Can you believe 54 minutes has already passed?
We've got 15 years to catch up.
Any final thoughts? Anything we didn't cover that you'd like to? squeeze
think we
in?
covered quite a lot of stuff. I think probably just it's going to be so interesting to see AI in the next 6 months. Like, it is changing so fast. And I think some stuff will probably evolve and go away. Other stuff will stick and go forwards. But I think it's certainly a really fascinating one. It's a really interesting time to be in tech. And hopefully we can keep hold of the good stuff, right? Like, I think if we can remember the people and the teams and trying to solve the problems that matter, and do that in the right way, we can't just throw out all of engineering, everything we've ever learned. But I think if we can deploy it as a tool to help us do that faster, then it's going to be some interesting times ahead.
Solve problems that matter. That's the title of the episode. So there you go.
I love it. Well, I mean, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
That's really good. Nice way to end it. But yeah, thank you, Amy. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the MoTaverse.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Rosie.